The lady or the tiger? Many, many years ago, there was a king in a far country. He was famous, he was strong, and he was very clever. But in his country, he had many wrongdoers. The king was unhappy about this. But how can you stop people from doing wrong? It is not easy. He thought about this difficult question for a long time, but he could not find the answer. Suddenly, one day, he had a good idea. He spoke to his people and told them to build a big stadium in the center of the city. It must be very big and very beautiful, he told them. So the people worked hard for many months. One day the building was finished. The stadium was ready. Inside it, there were places for 5,000 people. Everyone was very excited about this beautiful new building. Some wanted to watch games in the stadium. Others wanted to have dancing and singing. But what did the king want? No one knew. The day of the opening came. Everyone ran to the stadium to get a place inside. The people got more excited when the king arrived. They were all quiet, waiting. First he took his place. Then he stood up and spoke. "My people, my friends," he said. "Firstly, I want to thank all the workers for their good work. We now have a beautiful stadium, and it is very well built. Secondly, I know that many of you want to see games and dancing here. But this stadium is going to be different. It is not going to be a place for having a good time. It is going to be a place for wrongdoers. If one of you does something wrong, we are going to bring him to this place. There he must stand in the middle of this stadium in front of us all. Now, do you all see those two doors, coloured blue, at the far end of the stadium? They look the same, perhaps, but they are not. Behind one door, I am going to put a dangerous animal, a tiger. Behind the other door, there is going to be a beautiful lady. The wrongdoer must choose one of these doors. If he opens the wrong door, he finds the tiger. It jumps out and kills him. If he opens the other door, he finds the beautiful young woman. She is to be his wife. They must marry immediately, right here in the stadium before our eyes. After that, they can live happily with us as husband and wife. So, each wrongdoer must choose very carefully. Before he chooses, he and we cannot know if he is going to live or die. As soon as he opens one of those two doors, we all know immediately. That is my idea. So tell me, my friends, is it a good idea or is it not? "It is good, O King, it is very good," the people answered. But they were quiet. They were afraid. "Thank you," said the king. "Now go home. Come to the stadium again at the same time next week. Then you can watch the first wrongdoer make his choice. Every week from now on, a different man is going to choose to live, if he is lucky, or to die if he is not." From that day, the people came every week to the stadium to watch a different wrongdoer. Sometimes he opened the right blue door, and the beautiful lady came out. Then there was singing and dancing. Everyone threw flowers down to the lucky people and went home happily. But at other times, the wrongdoer opened the wrong door. Immediately, a big tiger ran out into the stadium and jumped on the unlucky man. In a few minutes, the tiger killed him in front of all the watching people. When he lay dead in the centre of the stadium, the people went home sadly. They took their flowers with them. It is interesting that in a short time the number of wrongdoers in the country got much smaller. No one wanted to stand in the middle of the stadium and make that difficult choice. Now, there is another important person in this story. The king had only one child, a daughter. She was very beautiful. She had green eyes and long red hair, and she moved as quickly as a cat. She too was strong and clever, as strong and clever as her father. She did not smile often, but when she smiled, people were happy. When she was angry, everyone was afraid. They knew that at those times she was a very dangerous young woman. Her picture was in every home. Men, women and children followed her when she went walking in the streets of the city. They waited to see her famous smile, and sometimes they were lucky. One day, she was out walking in a city park when she saw a young man. He was a gardener, and the park was where he worked. He was very good-looking. He was tall and strong. He had dark blue-black hair and a dark moustache. When he laughed, you could see his beautiful white teeth. The king's daughter stopped and looked at him closely. She thought that he was the most beautiful man in the world. She began to talk with him and liked him more and more. The young man could not understand. Why did the king's daughter want to talk to him? He was not important. He was only the king's gardener. But he could not take his eyes off her. As soon as he looked into her big green eyes and saw her smile, he was in love. But he knew that this love was very dangerous. He was not a rich man, not from a rich family. He could never marry the daughter of the king. But the two young lovers knew that they must meet again. They started to meet every day, at times when no one could see them. Every day their love was stronger and stronger. They were very happy. Then, one day, the king found them together, there in the city gardens. His daughter was in the young man's arms. The king was very, very angry. He called his men. Immediately they took the young man away and shut him in a dark, dirty room. They gave him only bread and water to eat. Now the king's daughter could not see her lover any more. The young man lay in the dark. He knew that he was a wrongdoer and in much danger from the king. Now we know that the king's daughter was a strong young woman and that she was very clever. When her father's men took her lover away, she too saw the danger immediately. She knew very well what was going to happen next. So early in the morning, she went to the stadium. No one saw her go. She spoke to the workers there and gave them some money. "Which room is the tiger in?" she asked. They told her. "And which girl is going to be behind the other door?" The workers did not want to answer. They were afraid. "I must know," said the king's daughter. "Who is she?" "She is the daughter of your father's driver," the workers answered. The king's daughter knew her well, a young and beautiful girl with rich brown hair. But the king's daughter did not like her. She began to think hard. "If my lover chooses the wrong door, he dies. But if he chooses the right door, he marries this cheap little thing, this driver's child, and I lose him to her. So I too must choose." That afternoon, the king called all his people back to the stadium again. His men brought the young man from the dark room. There he stood, in the middle of the stadium, tired, hungry, and afraid. The king sat in his place above the people. and his daughter sat next to him. She did not move. Her face showed nothing. Then the king stood and spoke to his people. "You all know this gardener, my friends, and you know why he is here. He was the lover of my daughter. For many weeks I did not know that, but I know it now. What happens to a wrongdoer in our country? That too we know. He must choose the lady or the tiger. If he opens the wrong door, he must fight the tiger. If he opens the right door, he must marry the lady. So now, choose, young man. Choose very carefully if you want to live and not die." The young man stood quietly and listened to the king's words. But his eyes were not on the king. They were on the face of the king's daughter. She had no smile for him today. But he looked at her eyes. Her eyes told him something. She looked down quickly at her hand. Then she looked up again. He saw her smallest finger move a little to the left. And immediately he knew. The door to open was the door on the left. He turned and walked very slowly to the left-hand door. All the people watched him, without a sound. He put out his hand and opened the door. But here the story ends. Remember that the king's daughter was a clever young woman. She was in love, but she was angry too. Did she want her lover to meet the tiger? A fight that he must lose? Did she want him to die? Or did she want him to live and have another beautiful woman for his wife? To give him this other woman in place of her? We do not know what ideas were at work inside her beautiful head. Tell me, what do you think? Which did she choose? What was behind that door? The lady or the tiger? Miss Bracegirdle's Night of Fear. "This is the room, madame." "Oh, thank you, thank you." "Does madame like the room?" "Oh, yes, thank you. It is very nice." "Does madame want anything more?" "If it is not too late, I want to have a hot bath." "That is quite easy, madame. The bathroom is the room at the end of this floor on the left. I can get the bath ready for madame. There is just one more thing. I came by train from England today, so I am very tired. Please do not bring my breakfast too early tomorrow. I want to have a good sleep tonight." "I understand, madame." The girl went off to get the bath ready. Millicent Bracegirdle was right. She was tired. She thought of Easingstoke, her hometown, now so far away. She remembered the drive to London early that morning, the train from London to Dover, the boat to Calais, then another train to Paris. By lunchtime she was in a third train, going from Paris to Bordeaux. Now, here she was in the hotel. It was 12 o'clock at night. Why was she here in southwest France, of all places? It was all because of Annie, her younger sister. Annie usually lived in South America. Earlier in the year, Annie got ill, and now she was to have a holiday in Europe. Miss Bracegirdle's brother could not come to meet Annie off the boat. He had too much work to do in Easingstoke. So Miss Bracegirdle was the only other person. "The ship is going to arrive in Bordeaux tomorrow," thought Miss Bracegirdle, "and I am going to see Annie again after all these years." This was Miss Bracegirdle's first visit to France. She did not usually take holidays away from home. Luckily, she spoke a little French. "It is not so difficult to live in France. she thought. The thing to understand is that it is quite different from Easingstoke. She took her things one by one out of her bag and put them away carefully. She thought about her home in Easingstoke, with flowers in all the rooms and photographs of the family. She thought about her poor brother working so hard. She felt a little sad, but only for a minute. Her time in France was to be quite short. She was going to be home again soon. Now she must get a good night's sleep. But first, that hot bath. She took off her day things and put on her nightdress. Then she picked up her washing things and went to the bathroom, closing her bedroom door quietly. She lay in the hot water and thought about the nice young girl in the hotel getting her bath ready. People in this hotel were very friendly, always ready to help. There was so much she wanted to tell her brother when she got home. She got out of the bath and put on her nightdress again. She cleaned the bath very carefully. She did not want French people to think that the English were dirty. Then she left the bathroom and went back to her bedroom. She went in quickly, put on the light and shut the door. Then one of those unlucky things happened. The handle of the door came off in her hand. She tried to put the handle back on the door, but she could not. "How do I do it?" she thought. "It is going to be very difficult to open the door now. Do I ask that nice girl to come and help me? Perhaps by now she is in bed." She turned away from the door, and suddenly she saw something much, much worse than the door handle. There was a man in her bed. She took one look at his thick black hair and his big black moustache, and immediately felt quite ill with fear. For a minute or two she could not think. Then her first thought was, "I must not scream." She stood there, but she could not move. She just looked at the man's dark head and the big line of his back under the bed things. She began to think very quickly. Her next thought was, "I am in the wrong room. It is the man's room." She could see his jacket and trousers lying on a chair, and his big black shoes on the floor. She must get out quickly. But how? She tried again to open the door with her fingers, but she could not. Here she was, shut in a hotel room with an unknown man, a Frenchman. She must think. She must think. She turned off the light. Perhaps with the light off, he is not going to wake up, she thought. That gives me more time to do something. But if he does wake up, what do I do? He is not going to believe my story. Nobody is going to believe me. In England, perhaps, but not here. How can they understand? So I must get out of this room. By waking him? By screaming? By calling the young girl? No, it is no good. If I scream or call out, people are going to come running immediately. And what do they find? Miss Bracegirdle from Easingstoke in a man's bedroom after 12 o'clock at night. Just think of all the talk back home when my friends hear about that. And if I climb out of the window? She thought of the big hairy man pulling her back by the legs as she tried to get out. He could wake up at any minute. She thought that she heard somebody going past outside the door, but it was too late to scream now. Suddenly she had an idea. It was now nearly 1 o'clock in the morning. Perhaps the sleeping man was not dangerous. At 7 or 8 o'clock he must get up and go out to work. I can get under the bed and wait there until he goes. Men never look under the bed. When he sees the door handle on the floor, he is going to open the door with something or call the girl to come. Later, I can come out from under the bed and go quietly back to my room. Nobody is going to know. She lay down on the floor and got under the bed. No sound came from the man above her, but from down here it was difficult to hear anything. She tried to think of her nice little bedroom in Easingstoke, with its nice white bed. But the floor was getting harder every minute. She tried to think what her room number was. 115? Or was it 116? She was always bad at remembering numbers. She began to think of her school days and the interesting things she learned then. Suddenly, she felt that she was going to sneeze. She could not stop it. The sneeze came, a long, hard one. "This is the end of me," Miss Bracegirdle thought. "Now this Frenchman is going to jump out of bed and turn on the light. Then he is going to look under the bed and pull me out. And then... what can I do then? I can scream if he puts his hands on me. Perhaps it is better to scream first, before that happens. If not, he can put his hand over my mouth and stop me from screaming." But no scream came out of her mouth. Her fear was much too strong. She stayed very quiet and listened. Was he going to hit her? With one of those heavy shoes, perhaps? But nothing happened. Miss Bracegirdle suddenly knew that she could not stay under that bed a minute longer. It was better to come out, wake up the man, and tell him everything. With difficulty, she got out from under the bed and stood up. She went over to the door and put on the light. She turned to the bed and said, as strongly as she could, "Monsieur!" Nothing happened. She looked at the man and said again, "Monsieur! Monsieur!" But again there was no answer. She went closer to the bed. His hair and moustache were very black, but his face had no colour in it. His mouth was open, but his eyes were shut. Then, for the third time that night, Miss Bracegirdle nearly died of fear. Suddenly her legs felt as weak as water. She nearly fell down, because the man in the bed was dead. It was the first time that she stood face to face with a dead person, but there was no mistake. The man was dead. Miss Bracegirdle could only say, "He's dead. He's dead." Her difficulties now were not important. She began to feel sorry for him, lying here dead in a hotel room. But a sudden sound broke into her thoughts. Somebody outside the door put down some shoes. The shoe-cleaning boy. She heard the sound of his feet die away and remembered where she was. To be in an unknown man's bedroom was bad, but to be in a room with a dead man was much, much worse. If they found her here, people were going to think she killed him. A picture came into her head. The police taking her off to the police station, asking her questions, shutting her away. And her sister arriving in just a few hours' time, too. She must get out of the room immediately. "I cannot call for help now," she thought, fighting back her fear. "Do something, Millicent. It is now or never." But what? She went round the room, looking for something to open the door with. She could find nothing. Finally, she picked up the man's jacket. Inside it she found a small knife. She took the knife and put it in the side of the door. Very slowly she turned the knife, and the door opened. She wanted to run out of the room immediately, but she stopped first and listened. Nobody was there. Feeling very afraid, Miss Bracegirdle shut the door quickly behind her and ran as fast as she could to her bedroom. She lay down on the bed, and the fear slowly began to leave her. All was well. But then she had another unhappy thought. The living fear came back. Her washing things were in there. They were lying there in the dead man's room, and her name was on them. To go back again now was far worse than the first time, but she had no choice. She could not leave her things lying there. If they find them, they are going to ask me how they got there, she thought. She had to go back. She went. She did not look at the bed. She quickly took her washing things and ran back again to her bedroom. Now that the danger was over, she suddenly felt very, very tired. She got into bed and put out the light. She lay in the dark, trying to forget her fears. Finally, she went to sleep. It was 11 o'clock when she woke up. The sun was high in the sky, and the fears of the night were far away. In the light of the day, it was all very difficult to believe. Miss Bracegirdle tried to think about other things. Finally, the young girl arrived to wake her up. Her eyes showed that she was excited. "Oh, madame," she said, "a very bad thing happened here last night. The man in room 117, he's dead. Please do not say that I told you, but the police were here, the doctor, everybody." Miss Bracegirdle said nothing. There was nothing to say. But the young woman was too excited to stop. "And do you know who this dead man was, madame? They say that he was Boldu, the famous killer wanted by the police. Last year he killed a woman and cut her up and threw her into the river. And last night he died here in our hotel, in the room next door. We do not know how. Did you say coffee, madame?" "No, thank you. Just a cup of tea. Strong tea, please." "Very well, madame." The girl left, and soon a man from the kitchen came with Miss Bracegirdle's cup of tea. Miss Bracegirdle thought that this was unusual. A man bringing tea to a lady's bedroom. These things did not happen in Easingstoke, but French people were different. She thought about the man in the next room. She felt quite sorry for him now, dying so suddenly, far from home. She got up, washed and dressed. After that, she took her pen and some paper and went down to the hotel sitting-room. Nobody in the hotel was very excited. Perhaps they did not know about the dead man. She went to the writing table and started to write her letter. Hotel Carlton, Bordeaux, 5th of September. My dear brother, I hope you are well. I arrived here late last night. The time in the train was long, but quite interesting. I nearly lost my glasses, but a nice man found them for me. The people here are very friendly, but the food is quite different from English food. I am going to meet Annie at 1 o'clock. I remembered in the train that there is some fruit from Mrs. Hunt's garden in the kitchen cupboard. I forgot to tell Lizzie about it, so please tell her for me. I do not want it to go bad. This is a nice hotel, but I think that Annie and I are going to move to the Grand Hotel tonight, because the rooms here are not very quiet. That is all there is to tell you for now. Be careful not to get cold. I am coming back soon. Your loving sister, Millicent. She could not tell her brother about last night, not in the letter, and not when she got home. It was too difficult to say how she came to be in a man's bedroom, an unknown man, a dead man. or about getting under his bed, or about opening the door with his knife. Her brother always felt unhappy if anything unusual happened to her. It was much better not to say anything. She put on her hat and coat and went out to send the letter. The sun was warm. It was good to walk in the streets. There were a lot of people in the cafes, laughing, talking, moving about. They were so different from the people in Easingstoke. It was exciting to be in France. "I was in a Frenchman's bedroom all last night," she suddenly thought. She smiled. Miss Bracegirdle walked more quickly to the letter-box to send her letter. Her face was a little red, but perhaps only because it was a warm day. She put her letter in the box and waited to hear it fall inside. It fell. So that was that. She turned and went to meet her sister off the boat from South America.